Good evening and welcome to Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and I am joined by my co-host, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo. Tommy.
Hey, Angel.
Hey, and we are here tonight introducing Wrestling Archives. And this evening, we are going to go over just through the hour, a list of professional wrestling television series and from every era, from the 50s to the 90s. And we're rewinding on wrestling history so that, of course, people know where everything comes from then. And just guiding you through different generations of wrestling and different results of shows and arena results. So by the time you get done being educated in the territories and the different promoters that existed back in the day, then you'll understand the arena results that are coming to you soon with Tommy Cairo's Wrestling Archives. Yeah. So let's get right into it. We are going to cover a list of professional wrestling television series. And we're going to start with the territories and the era from the 1950s to the 1970s. So let me just get to that.
That's the TV era. Just a quick note, in the old days, when not everybody had a TV, when very few people, maybe one person on the block was well off enough to have a TV, what they would do is in all the appliance stores, they would set all the TVs to wrestling. And people would stand on the sidewalk and watch through the window, knowing that if they put wrestling on, more than likely people would go there and see it and have an example of what they could have in their living room and then start saving their pennies to get a TV. Or if one person in the neighborhood had a TV, everybody would go over there. So it was a big deal back then in that era when wrestling first hit TV. It was one of the first things that was featured regularly on television.
Yeah, it's a great show to, gather up the family with. Back then, it was like, people would actually gather their families up and watch professional wrestling. So, great program to draw people in to buy television. They want to see that kind of action every week. And with the 1950s, provided that for them. So the series back then will go by series, country, the duration of the time of the promotion and how long it ran, and the number of episodes if available. So first off, we have Hollywood Wrestling from the United States. It was from the duration 1947 and 1955, and the promotion was NWA Hollywood Wrestling. Let's see.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, that turned into wrestling from the Olympic Auditorium. I don't know at what point, but maybe we'll find that out.
Okay, Hollywood Wrestling, also known as Wrestling from Hollywood, was an American professional wrestling television series which originally aired locally in Los Angeles on KTLA in the early 1950s, and by 1952 nationally Kinescope on the improvised Paramount television network. It was produced by Klaus Landsberg. So that was from the United States. And then there was Wrestling from Marigold. That was from the United States. The duration, it says Dumont, from 1949 to 1955. It was on WGN TV from 1955 to 1957. The promotion was produced by Fred Kohler Enterprises. And let's see. Wrestling from Marigold is an American sport program broadcast from Marigold Arena in Chicago, which aired on the Dumont Television Network from Saturday, September 17th, 1949 until March 1955. The show was either 90 or 120 minutes, usually on Saturdays at 9 p.m., and continued to be broadcast on WGN TV as a non-network show until 1957.
That's a long show, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Wow.
Yeah, really. Back then, I guess the family was gathered up. You could make it a long show back then with no problem. Then we have Portland Wrestling from the United States, syndicated 1953 to 1992. That's a long run.
It is.
That's a long run. Let's see, it's Pacific Northwest Wrestling. So those Portland Wrestling. Let's see.
We did results on that yesterday.
Yes, yes.
Previous.
Yes. Then we have Portland Wrestling, and that was from the United States, syndicated 1953 to 1992. Again, I'm sorry. You've heard that. Then we got Japan Pro Wrestling Alliance. If that was from 1953 to 1973, Japan Pro Wrestling Alliance. And then Saturday Night Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1954 to 1977 from the American International Wrestling Federation. So, wow. And then Heavyweight Wrestling from the United States, Dumont, 1956 to 1970, Capital Wrestling Corporation. So let's see, Heavyweight Wrestling is the first weekly televised wrestling program that was produced by the WWE, which at the time was a regional professional wrestling promotion called Capital Wrestling Corporation, a member of the National Wrestling Alliance. The show was hosted by Bill Malone in 1956, Mars Siegel from 1956 to 1959, and Ray Morgan from 1959 to 1970. And was taped at the Capitol Arena in Washington, D.C. The show debuted on January 5th, 1956, and aired until the summer of 1970, when Vincent James McMahon moved the television tapings to the Eastern Pennsylvania and replaced heavyweight wrestling with Wwf Championship Wrestling with and Morgan stayed with the Championship Wrestling until he was replaced by McMahon's son, Vincent K. McMahon. So
that's the wrestling I grew up on, where I saw that incident with Bruno when he missed his flight and so on from that Capitol Arena with Ray Morgan. So he's the one I remember when I first started watching.
Yes, I remember you saying that. Okay, and then we have Stampede Wrestling from Canada, syndicated from 1957 to 1989, and then again from 1999 to the year 2000 under Stampede Wrestling. And
that's the Hart family.
It is. It went all the way up there. Okay, Stampede Wrestling was a Canadian professional wrestling promotion based in Calgary, Alberta for nearly 50 years. It was one of the main promotions in Western Canada and the Canadian prairies. Originally established by Stu Hart in 1948, the promotion competed with other promotions such as NWA All-Star Wrestling and Pacific Northwest Wrestling, and regularly ran events in Calgary's Victoria Pavilion, Ogden Auditorium, and the Stampede Corral between 1948 and 1984. Wow, weird. Yep. Bought out by promoter Vince McMahon, the company was briefly run by WWF before being sold back to the Hart family the following year. Run by Bruce Hart until January 1990. He and Ross Hart reopened the promotion in 1999 and began running events in the Alberta area. So,
and that's where if you would watch that show now, you can see how it has such an international flair, and guys like Davey Boy Smith, Dynamite Kid, Bret Hart. That's where they all got their start, and that's where that international style was developed. They were innovators in bringing those people in. And when they brought Dynamite Kid in, he was a skinny guy. One of the sons had gone to on a tour of Japan and saw him there and brought him back. And the first thing Stu Hart said, he's a little skinny little bastard, eh? So they give the Hart's the sons a lot of credit for being able to see that this 150-pound kid would develop into, one of the most innovative and influential workers ever.
Good eye. Then we got All-Star Wrestling. That was from the United States, syndicated from 1958 to 1979 under Big Time Wrestling. Then we have Studio Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1959 to 1972. And Studio Wrestling was a live professional wrestling show broadcast from WIIC-TV Channel 11 in Pittsburgh every Saturday evening. In 1959, WIIC began broadcasting professional wrestling from their studio located in Fineview. The show was hosted by Bill Cardile through most of its run, although he was not its original host. The primary directors were Chuck Moyer and Jack Blariot. Pardon me if I said that wrong. Then we have Wrestling at the Chase from the United States, syndicated from 1959 to 1983 from the St. Louis Wrestling Club. And Wrestling at the Chase is a professional wrestling television series of local and national historical importance in the field of television wrestling. The show was recorded in St. Louis, Missouri for KPLR-TV Channel 11 and aired from May 23rd, 1959 to September 10th, 1983. It was promoted by the St. Louis Wrestling Club, which was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance. So,
yeah, that was very interesting. And a side note to that is that was a very exclusive hotel. So when they first started the tapings, the people were seated at like dinner tables. That's how they set it up for the audience. You know, later they went to regular style, but it was like a high end. People went in suits and women got dressed up. So it was like a nice change from, you know, these buildings and venues that were run down and old.
Farms and barns and whatever. Right. Then we move on to 50th State Big Time Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1962 to 1979, 50th State Big Time Wrestling. And then we got Vancouver All-Star Wrestling from Canada, syndicated from 1962 to 1989 under NWA All-Star Wrestling. So then we got Titanis NL Ring from Argentina.
Wow.
Canal 9, whatever that is, 1962 to 1988. Wow. 62 to 88.
I'm going to have to look that up. I'm going to have to check that out.
You know what? I hope it's written in English. Okay. It was an Argentinian Lucha Libre television program that aired between March 3rd, 1962 and 1988.
Wow.
And let's see. The founder was Martin Karadagian, and it defunct in 2001.
Wow.
The headquarters was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, South America. Let's see. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm quite sure, you will find Bobby Bold Eagle somewhere in there because that's one of the places, out of the way places that, you know, he wrestled.
Right, from 62 to 88, I'm pretty sure he probably passed through there one time. Then we move on to Big Time Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1964 to 1980. And then WWA All-Star Championship Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1964 to 1989 as WWA. Not sure which one they're going with there.
I'm pretty sure.
The World Wrestling Alliance was an Indianapolis-based professional wrestling promotion, which was operated by Dick the Bruiser and his partner, Wilbur Snyder. It was affiliated with the larger American Wrestling Association and recognized its champions, along with its own and those of Indianapolis-based Powerful Women of Wrestling. It ran from 1964 to 1989.
Yep, that was, Dick the Bruiser.
Yes.
Crusher, all the same crew from AWA, absolutely.
And then we got World Championship Wrestling from Australia, and Channel 9. It was on from 1964 to 1978 as World Championship Wrestling, before World Championship Wrestling. And then we have the World of Sports United Kingdom, and that aired from 1965 to 1985, and then 2016 to 2018 in joint promotions. So the World of Sports British TV was a British television program which ran on ITV between January 2nd, 1965 and September 28, 1985, in competition with the BBC's Grandstand. Like Grandstand, the program ran for several hours every Saturday afternoon. So,
lots of huge stars. You can see early Dynamite Kid, and early Davey Boy Smith, and early Fit Finlay, and then you can see Mark Rollerball Rocco, who I think was one of the Black Tigers in Japan. So a lot of history there, and a lot of those guys went on to become stars elsewhere, including in the United States.
And then we got Telecatch from Brazil, and that was on Excelsior from 1967 to 1980, another really long run. Yeah. And Telecatch was a Brazilian professional wrestling TV program originally called Telecatch Montelia. It was a broadcast by TV Globo from 1967 to 1969. The name of the program would later be changed to Os Ris do Ringo. Excuse me if that's wrong. In the 1970s by Record TV, which translates literally to the Kings of the Ring. In 1965, TV Excelsior premiered the program with the name Telecatch Vulcan. For some reason of economy, the chain of stores Imperatriz das Cidades, the main sponsor and associated companies decided not to finance Telecatch and to definitely finish the program. It was similar to American professional wrestling with its diverse and colorful ring performers and predetermined outcomes. And the formation of the show was a direct result of the public's shock at brutality of Vale Tudo, which used to air on the TV show that was originally aired in the same time slot as Telecatch Montelia. So a little Brazilian.
Vale Tudo, was an early form of like a mixed martial art.
Right.
So
okay,
evidently they were already used to the brutality from that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So and then we got Big Time Wrestling. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No,
and Big Time.
Obviously, I'm going to have to make a list because there's some of these that I'm not familiar with that I'm hoping I can find some footage.
Yeah, and a lot of it does have some footage connected to it that we can't play, but we will spend time looking up later so that we can review it in later arena reports. So, and then we move on to Big Time Wrestling. That was from the United States, syndicated from 1971 to 1979 under NWA Big Time Wrestling. And then Georgia Championship Wrestling, United States, 1971 to 1984 from the TBS studios, the Georgia Championship Wrestling. And then we got Wwf Championship Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1972 to 1979, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. All right, so the WWF Championship Wrestling is a professional wrestling television series produced by the World Wrestling Federation. WWF, now known WWE, it aired from 1972 to August 30th, 1986, and was the original television show of the WWF, originally produced under the Worldwide Wrestling Federation banner. Championship Wrestling featured all the stars of WWF interviews and championship matches. It was a flagship program of the WWF's syndicated programming until it was replaced by Superstars of Wrestling in 1986.
Yeah, they went through all kinds of changes. WWF, WWF, WWE.
Right. I guess the thing with WWF and the confusion with the wildlife, I think they had some kind of dispute with that at the time. Then we move on to All Japan Pro Wrestling, and that was on Nippon TV from 1972 to present. 1972 to present. All Japan Pro Wrestling. Let's go.
I remember going to meet a guy at the lobby of a hotel who was selling tapes back then, VCR tapes. And that was the only place you can get any of that. And I was like, I couldn't wait to get there and pick up my tapes,
I used to get them through tape traders myself. All Japan, or simply All Japan, is a Japanese professional wrestling promotion established on October 21st, 1972, when Giant Baba split away from the Japanese Wrestling Association and created his own promotion. Many wrestlers had left with Baba, with many more joining the following year when NWA folded. From the mid-70s, All Japan was firmly established as the largest promotion in Japan. As the 1990s began, aging stars gave way to a younger generation, including Matsuhiro Misawa, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Kenta Kobayashi, Gary Albright, Toshikaki Kawada, Mike Barton, and Akira Tura. Sorry if I pronounce any of those names wrong, leading to perhaps AJPW's most profitable period in the 1990s.
Yeah, so you had Baba, and then eventually Inoki started his own group, which would have been New Japan, and All Japan was Baba. So you had Baba and Inoki, two big names battling it out for supremacy.
So, and then we move on to exactly that. NJPW World Pro Wrestling from Japan. It was on net from 1973 to 1977. TV Ashi from 1977 to present. So still in operation. New Japan Pro Wrestling. New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
So New Japan Pro Wrestling is a Japanese professional wrestling promotion based in Nakano, Tokyo, founded on January 13th, 1972 by Antonio Inoki. The promotion was sold to Ukes, who later sold it to Bushiroad in 2012. TV Ashi and Amuse Inc. own the minority shares of the company. Naiko Shugabayashi has served as the promotion's chairman since September 2013, while Takami Obari has served as the president of the promotion since October 2020. Okay. Wow. Still running.
History there. Yep. At one time when I was in Japan for UWF, which would have been around 95, in between ECW, you could watch All Japan, New Japan TV. So I don't know how old the matches were at that point, but on the TV it had a little button for English, or you leave it the way it was, and it would, they'd do the commentary in Japanese. So you used to hit the button and hear, a guy, with a Japanese accent speaking in English, describing the action, and I lived for that because there wasn't much to do over there, and that was on twice a week, so I made sure I was there ready to watch.
So, and then we move on to Lucha Libre Intercontinental, from the Dominican Republic, from Canal 9, from 1973 to 1997.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been Jack Veneno. His name should pop up.
Okay. And then we got WWF All-Star Wrestling from United States, syndicated from 1974 to 1986 from the World Wrestling Federation. So another show from the WWF. And there was the Best of Championship Wrestling from the United States, TBS, 1973 to 1987, Georgia Championship Wrestling under Jim Crockett Promotions. So the Best of Championship Wrestling, it was an hour-long show that was the Sunday evening edition of TBS's Saturday night wrestling shows, Georgia Championship Wrestling and NWA World Championship Wrestling. The rights to Best of World Championship Wrestling now belong to the World Wrestling Entertainment. Big shocker.
Yeah.
So
they bought up everything.
Yeah. So, all right. And then we have On the Mat from New Zealand that aired from 1975 to 1984 on TV2 under NWA New Zealand. And On the Mat was a professional wrestling television program from the National Wrestling Alliance affiliated All-Star Pro Wrestling, or simply NWA New Zealand, that aired on television, New Zealand's TV2 from 1975 to 1984, one of the most popular and the longest running weekly sports series in the history of New Zealand. The show featured some of the country's top wrestlers and international stars from throughout the world during the 1970s and early 80s.
Yeah, that was an excellent
program.
Show. Yeah, if you look at that, you'll see they had like the setup and the desk, and it was very upscale and a little bit ahead of its time. And they always spoke about a season, this season. So I don't know what that meant, if it meant a TV season or whether.
Yeah, all these are by their TV series. So all these were televised. Actually, they were on from 75 to 84, so they had a pretty long run themselves.
Yep.
And then we move on to Superstars of Wrestling from Canada, syndicated from 1975 to 1984 under Canadian American Wrestling Association. And the Superstars of Wrestling, also known as the Canadian Wrestling Association, was an internationally syndicated Canadian professional wrestling television program based in Windsor, Ontario. The show ran live events in Eastern Canada and the Great Lakes region of the United States from 1975 to 1984. Okay.
Another good long run.
Yeah. And then there's the Worldwide Wrestling from United States, syndicated from 1975 to 2001 under Jim Crockett Promotions. It comes up under World Championship, WCW. Worldwide is an American syndicated television show that produced by World Championship Wrestling, aired from October 8, 1975 to March 31st, 2001. At the time of its cancellation, Worldwide was the longest running uninterrupted weekly syndicated show of its kind on the air in the United States.
Yeah, they also, like WWF, you'll see that shows morphed into other shows, or they came up with a new name for the show. So Worldwide was one of those. Exactly.
So, and then we got Cwa Championship Wrestling from the United States from WMCTV from 1977 to 1989 under Continental Wrestling Association. And Continental Wrestling Association, the Championship Wrestling Association, was a wrestling promotion managed by Jerry Jarrett. The CWA was the name of the governing body for the Championship Wrestling Incorporated promotion, which was usually referred to as Mid-Southern Wrestling or the Memphis Territory. This promotion was a chief NWA territory during the 1970s and the early 1980s while operating out of Tennessee and Kentucky. The CWA was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance until 1986 and affiliated with the American Wrestling Association until 1989. In 1989, the CWA merged with the World Class Wrestling Association to form the United States Wrestling Association, thus USWA, thus ceasing to exist as a separate entity. Lance Russell and Dave Brown were the TV commentators and hosts for the Memphis territory, including Continental Wrestling Association. They both actually did commentary to my match in 1985 when I wrestled Miss Texas. So very exciting stuff there. Lance Russell, always great to have him do your match's commentary.
Yeah, so, he's the one who did that personalizing. Come on, Jerry. You know,
yes.
Bill, come on now. Let's get these guys out of here. That's enough. You know, it was awesome.
Great stuff. So, and then we're moving on now to the 1980s wrestling boom. So again, we go by series, country, duration of the series, and the promotion. We start off with WWF All-American Wrestling from the United States on the USA Network from 1983 to 1994 under the WWF. And another WWF show. WWF
now I'm sorry, I keep stepping on you.
That's okay.
You're talking about now. We're talking about the cable television era. So we've moved from these little studios. Now you got a network, USA Network. So much more a larger area that they were. You know, the show was shown in a much larger audience than before.
Right. So, and then again, another one, WWF on TBS from the United States, and that aired from 1984 to 1985. So just a year, and I'm pretty sure that was, you know, just for spite, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, you know, TBS wound up being, the enemy. So WWF aired on TBS, and then later down the road, TBS against the WWF.
So, and this is what it was referred to: Black Saturday Professional Wrestling. In professional wrestling, the term Black Saturday refers to Saturday, July 14th, 1984, the day when Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation took over the time slot on Superstation WTBS that had been the home to Georgia Championship Wrestling and its flagship weekly program, World Championship Wrestling, for 12 years. McMahon's purchase led to a long-standing rivalry between himself and WTBS owner Ted Turner, who later brought GCW's successor, Jim Crockett Promotions, JCW, and formed his own company under World Championship Wrestling.
Yep.
So,
Georgia's show went right into World Championship Wrestling, and then TBS 605, 705, forever.
And then we got WWF Wrestling Spotlight from the United States that ran from 1984 to 1995.
Wow.
So a little bit different of a program, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's see. Still the same banners. They included pay-per-views, video on demand services. I don't know what was different about that.
It was just the beginning.
Okay, and then we move on to International Championship Wrestling from the United States. That was syndicated from 1984 to 1995 under International World Class Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
And International World Class Championship Wrestling, IWCCW, was an independent wrestling promotion based in Boston, Massachusetts. It was promoted by Angelo Savoldi and his son Mario, Tom, and Joseph Savoldi.
Yeah, they kind of, I don't know how that worked, but either they were airing old world class footage.
They did that a lot.
Yeah, they did.
I noticed that. Okay, and then we have International Championship Wrestling from the United States that was syndicated from 1984 to 1995 as International World Champ. Okay, I did that. And then Wrestlo from Wales.
Wow.
From 1987 to 1995 on C4C. And let's see, Wrestlo. Arjun Williams. Okay. Was a Welsh professional wrestler and wrestling promoter. Williams spent his wrestling career in the persona of a villainous evil heel under the pseudonym El Bandito, and after retiring as a fighter, he became a promoter, manager, and television presenter. He is recognized as one of the most famous wrestlers to come from Wales.
So
I
remember the name.
Okay, I guess he was their champion, or is that what they're?
Oh.
Okay, and then we move on to WWF Tuesday Night Titans from the United States on the USA Network from 1984 to 1986. I don't know what was different about it. Just another WWF show.
Yeah,
and
that would be added to whatever they were running regularly. I don't think they swapped them out. I think it was just an added content with a different name. Yeah,
it aired on USA from May 29th, 1984 to September 24th, 1986. It was a 2-hour-long show, began airing on Tuesday nights from May 29th to December 18th, 1984. From January 4th, 1985 to March 28th, 1986. The show was cut from 1 hour and moved to Friday nights. On April 2nd, 1986, the show was moved to Wednesday nights, where it remained there until its final episode on September 24th, 1986. All episodes of Tuesday Night Titans are available, of course, on the WWE Network.
Of course.
So, and this is why they made all these shows, so that then now they can sell them in their catalog. Then we move on to Saturday Night's Main Event from the United States on NBC from 1985 to 1991, and then from 2006 to 2008, and then it moved over to Fox in 1992.
I think that signals the first, what would you call broadcast on a major network.
Well, okay, produced by WWE, now WWF, whatever. Premiering in 1985, it was originally aired on NBC in the United States as 29 occasional replacements for Saturday Night Live until 1991, then twice on Fox in 1992. It was revived in 2006 for 5 NBC episodes before ending in 2008. In Canada, it also aired on City TV and Global Television Network in order to meet, substitution rights or whatever. I don't know what that means, but okay. And then moving on to another WWF show, WWF Primetime Wrestling, and that ran on the USA Network from 1985 to 1993. Let's see what was different about this. It aired from January 1st, 1985 to January 4th, 1993, precursor to Monday Night Raw. Primetime Wrestling was a 2-hour-long weekly program that featured the stars of the World Wrestling Federation. The program featured wrestling matches, which were, house shows from Madison Square Garden, interviews, promos, feuds, announcements of upcoming local shows, pay-per-views. Primetime Wrestling would also air matches and interviews from other WWF programmings, such as Superstars of Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge. Episodes 61 to 227 of Primetime Wrestling are available, of course, on the WWE Network.
Now, the funny thing about the WWF at this point, they've ceased to do any studio-type wrestling. So while the other groups were doing studio wrestling, they were moving into, like you said, taping house shows and so on.
Well, you could see on the list here, it's like year by year, they would end one show, and then it's like the very next year, it pops up another show. So here goes another one, WWF Wrestling Challenge, United States, syndicated from 1986 to 1995. So, and then, okay, I don't know what was different about this. Let's see. Let's see. The matches primarily saw top tier and mid-level talent versus jobbers. At times, and they put jobbers there. There was a feature match at times between the main event talent with WWF. I don't know. As with other syndicated WWF programming, the show promoted WWF events and house shows, media marketing. So pretty much the same format, but given jobbers exposure, I guess.
Yeah, and then also it said they had every once in a while had a feature match, so then you felt like you were getting something special. Yeah,
taking a look at the Journeyman.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we have AWA Championship Wrestling from the United States, and that was on ESPN from 1985 to 1990 as American Wrestling Association. And American AWA Championship Wrestling is a professional wrestling television series that aired on cable sports network ESPN from 1985 to 1990. It was a continuation of the earlier ESPN program, Pro Wrestling USA, the cooperative venture between the American Wrestling Association and several National Wrestling Alliance NWA affiliates, most notably Jim Crockett Promotions. On February 26, 2008, ESPN Classics began re-airing AWA Championship Wrestling episodes, along with the ownership of the AWA intellectual property by the WWE. All the episodes are available, of course, on WWE Network. So
that really gave them a lot of exposure being on ESPN. I remember I was working at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel as a house detective, they called it. And I would make sure I got a room key for, a room that was vacant. And I go up there and I watch AWA wrestling.
Get your wrestling in while you're working. Why not? Yeah. Okay. And then there was WWF Superstars of Wrestling, the United States, syndicated from 1986 to 1996. From the USA Network from 1996 to the year 2000, and then on TNN from the year 2000 to 2001. So WWF Superstars of Wrestling, 1986 is the flagship program, is their syndicating program. Okay, so same.
Yep.
And then moving on, we got the Universal Wrestling Federation, UWF, syndicated from 1986 to 1987. Universal Wrestling Federation was run by Bill Watts. I don't know why it seemed like it's so much longer. that,
know,
right?
You're right.
So the Universal Wrestling Federation was a 1986 rebranding of wrestler turned owner Bill Watts' Mid-South Wrestling promotion. Watts' goal was to elevate his promotion from a relatively smaller regional level business to a national level rival for the WWF, now known as the WWE. However, Watts' business strategy quickly swung from overnight success to catastrophic failure, resulting in the 1987 sale of the UWF to another rival, Jim Crockett Promotions, owner of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA's most important championships and the predecessors of World Championship Wrestling. The promotion began as the NWA territory, NWA Tri-State, founded by Leroy McGurk in the 1950s. Tri-State, Mid-South, UWF promoted in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi until 1987. That was some stuff that stuck with you so much that you really thought it was on longer than that. Only a year. I'm shocked.
Yeah, unless we confuse it with Mid-South, because
it's Bill Watts.
Yeah.
You know, only a year. So I guess because it was mixed in with a lot of NWA and a lot of the talent when they closed, then got, just bumped over to the NWA. Yep. It seemed like longer to us because we were seeing the same talent just shift.
Sure.
And then next we have the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1986 to 1990, and then again in 2001 under the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And this was also known as Glow, is a women's professional wrestling promotion that began in 1986. The pilot was filmed in December 1985 and has continued in various forms after it left television. Colorful characters, strong women, and over-the-top comedy sketches were integral to the series' success. Most of the performers were actresses, models, dancers, or stunt women hoping to enter show business.
Yeah, it was wild. They had these crazy. I remember Dementia was like this wacky, played a psychotic, and I think I don't know, Aja Kong or whatever, the big Japanese woman. I think she started there also.
Oh, did she?
Yeah,
I don't remember her there. Yeah. I remember Bertha Faye. I think was a character there, and oh God, well, Ivory was there.
They had to mix in a couple workers because otherwise, how are you going to get these people to know what to do?
Right, Terry Powers, that was another Glow girl, and lots of Glow girls. So, and then we move on to WWC Super Estrellas de la Lucha Libre,
Superstars of Pro Wrestling.
WAPA TV from 1980 to present. Still run in Puerto Rico, WWC World Wrestling Council. Bravo. World Wrestling Council is a professional wrestling promotion based in Puerto Rico. It was originally established as Capital Sports Promotions in 1973 by Carlos Colon Sr., Victor Jovica, and Gorilla Monsoon. It was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance until 1988, and then by mid-1990s, the promotion had changed its name to the World Wrestling Council. Still running strong.
Yeah. Well, Carlos Colon Sr. would be considered the Vince McMahon of Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. Then we have the Superstars of Wrestling from the United States, syndicated from 1986 to 1992. Let's see what that is. Superstars of Wrestling is another from 1986 to 1992, created and produced by Joe Pedicino. The series broadcast 8 hours of wrestling from around the country and was the first to provide national coverage of both the National Wrestling Alliance and international promotions. It was also the earliest United States television show to regularly broadcast Japanese Puroresu and Joshi Wrestling as part of the Fuji TV network's efforts to develop a market in the American industry. So that's pretty interesting.
They went around I'm sorry, they went around and they say tonight we're going to visit Memphis, we're going to visit Japan. So yes, they were the first show to ever show clips from different areas, and there was no politics involved.
Yeah, they covered everything. It was like a review show, and was his wife, the ring announcer Bonnie Blackstone, right?
Yeah.
So they added something to a show. It was a different show. They weren't the wrestlers, they were just talking about other shows and other promotions. So it was a good review show. I mean, I caught up until 1992. Running. So, and then we move on to WCW Pro from the United States, syndicated from 1986 to 1998, on TBS from 1994 to 1998 under World Championship Wrestling. And WCW Pro was, it was part of the WCW Disney tapings. So it's when they taped the Disney studios. The rights to WCW Pro now belong, surprisingly, to WWE, and 161 episodes of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling are now available on WWE Network.
Of course.
Then we move along to Southern Championship Wrestling from Georgia, and that was syndicated from 1988 to 1990 under Southern Championship Wrestling. Southern Championship Wrestling was a professional wrestling promotion that was founded in Marietta, Georgia by Jerry Blackwell and operated from 1988 to 1990 and was continued by his successor, Joe Pedicino, who ran the promotion Georgia All-Star Wrestling for another year. And then we move on to EWF Wrestling from France that was on Eurosport TV from 1988 to 1992 under European Wrestling Federation. And then moving on to WWF, the main event, United States on NBC network from 1988 to 1991. Let's see. They had 5 specials. So the WWF main event, it was, there were 5 shows between 1988 and 1991. Only the first 3, the main event episodes, were shown live on NBC. The final 2 episodes were taped and then shown on NBC at a later date, and included mainly high card wrestlers in the WWF, such as Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior, and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then there was the WCW Clash of the Champions from the United States that was on TBS from 1988 to 1997 World Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, those were like
different shows,
like pay-per-view level shows that didn't probably, I don't know how many did a year, but
let's see, I actually attended a lot of these in person. I traveled a lot of places for these. It was a series of professional wrestling television specials that were produced by World Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions in conjunction with the National Wrestling Alliance. These were special supercards comprising of pay-per-view caliber matches similar to the World Wrestling Federation's Saturday Night's Main Event series. The Clash of the Champions shows were famous for typically not airing commercials during matches, and even though many of the matches lasted 20 minutes or more, no commercials at all. And that was actually a highlight, because you didn't have to you'd be cut in the middle of the match.
Yeah.
No one wants that.
Yep. And
then moving on to WCW Main Event, which aired from 1988 to 1998 with the WCW. And let's see, nothing really different about that. Then there was WCW Power Hour, and that aired from 1989 to 1994 on TBS. It's just another WCW show to compete against a WWF show, because they both had 1 million shows going on at the time.
Yeah. I guess it's like anything else. You own a bar and it has a name or a theme, and it's only good for X amount of time before it's either out of style or it starts losing steam. And that's why I think there's so many different. You didn't want the other company to come out with a new show and then you not have one.
Well, and the thing is, you want to keep up with your competition, and it's a lot of what it's about, and it's a lot of where the fun is, and a lot of fun for the fans too, because then they get to see two products competing against each other, and there's a thrill in that a little bit.
But it never registered to us that there were all these. It's WWE, it's WWF, it's NWA. The name of the shows, it really didn't not change anything.
Well, I only knew because I used to record them all the time, and I was in charge of recording stuff. So, all right, and then we got the Legends of World Class Championship Wrestling from the United States that was on ESPN from 1988 to 1989 under World Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
So, all right, and World Class Championship Wrestling was an American professional wrestling promotion headquarters in Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, originally owned by promoter Ed McLemore. By 1966, it was run by Southwest Sports, Inc., whose president, Jack Atkinson, was better known as wrestler Fritz von Erich. Beginning as a territory of the National Wrestling Alliance, it went independent in 1986 in a bid to become a major national promotion, but was unsuccessful in its attempts and eventually went out of business in 1990. Rights to the pre-1989 WCCW tape library now belong to
WWE.
Of course. The post-1988 rights are owned by International World Class Championship Wrestling, and our select episodes from 1982 to 1988 are available on WWE. So, World Class, a hell of a territory. Legends of the United States Wrestling Association was our next one, again on 1990, 1991, and that was the United States Wrestling Association, was a professional wrestling promotion based in Memphis, Tennessee. The company was founded when the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association merged with the Dallas-based World Class Championship Wrestling. So, or World Class
Association. A lot of stuff going on in there, with the USW.
A lot of merging, a lot of people getting together, working together. Then we move on to UWF Fury Hour from the United States, and that was on Sports Channel America in 1990, 1991. And Prime Ticket, it came on in 1992 and ESPN2 in 1995 under the Universal Wrestling Federation for Herb Abrams.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so UWF was an American professional wrestling promotion owned by Herb Abrams from 1990 to 1996. So this was the later one. The company aired nationally on Sports Channel America and later on Prime Ticket and ESPN2. Nothing really about that.
Bruno Sammartino was one of the commentators. And a funny story real quick about that belt was made by my friend Mike V, who made a lot of the ECW belts. And it was called the FU belt because next to the center plate, it said UWF, center plate, UWF. So it was FU.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's see. Then we have, UWF Fury Hour. And then we have the main event from New Zealand from TV3. And that was just the year 1990 under NWA New Zealand. And the main event is advertised as something called On the Mat. Yes, it was a professional wrestling television program for the National Wrestling Alliance affiliated All-Star Professional Wrestling ASPW, or simply NWA New Zealand, that aired on Television New Zealand's TV2 from 1975 to 1984. One of the most popular and longest running weekly shows series in the history of New Zealand. The show featured some of the country's top wrestlers and international stars from throughout the world during the 1970s and early 80s. So On the Mat.
One of the announcers, I think, was Lord Athol Leighton. I'm not sure, but I know there was somebody of note that we would know from just being a popular wrestler, was one of their commentators.
That's great. So I think we gave a pretty thorough history. Not going to really get into the 90s because That's more of a current rewind than the material that we're covering. And I think we did a good amount from the 50s right up to the 90s, throughout the 80s, and right up to the 90s. So to familiarize yourself with the territories there were, the promoters that were putting on shows, and then, you know, some of the people that were working in the area and the TV shows that were on air. What we were watching, you know, that's what was promoting the future of professional wrestling from the WWF and the Memphis areas and like all over the world. So we get a feeling of where these places are, so that then now in the future, when we talk about them, everyone can know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you can see the progression from early TV studios and, you know, smaller networks. Then you went into NBC, which not much wrestling beyond the 50s and 60s was on network television, as you can see. NBC is the only thing you really heard. ESPN is a cable station, so I wouldn't call that, you know, a major network, but it did open up, you know, the scope for people to see wrestling that they weren't previously able to see. ESPN was great for that because they did ESPN Classics.
Yeah, they really were. They did the rewind with, like, you know, World Class and even IWCCW and, you know, up to the more current shows. So ESPN was really a great network for wrestling, I think.
It was. And again, you know, within the framework of what we did tonight, you could see the progression, how things changed, and it got bigger and bigger, more shows added, and the competition was really heating up at that point. Way before the Monday Night Wars, you know, it was already happening.
Thank you for joining us on Wrestling Archives. And we will be here every Sunday night at 7 p.m. on YouTube on the Monty and the Pharaohs network here. So please join us back next week while we uncover wrestling history in Wrestling Archives. And until then, from my co-host Tommy Cairo, I am the Virgin Princess Angel saying, have a nice night and a nice life. Good night.